is CNN 10. Give us 10 minutes, we'll get you up to speed on what's happening worldwide. And today, that starts in Asia. I'm Carl Azus. It's great to have you watching. Since June, protests have been welling up in Hong Kong. The ones that happened last weekend involved dozens of arrests, injuries to police officers, and a noticeable increase in violence. Officially, Hong Kong is a special administrative region of China. What that means is that the city has more authority to govern itself than the Chinese mainland. However, many protesters in Hong Kong are concerned that some of their democratic freedoms are being threatened, while China says it has ultimate control over the city and the authority to intervene and prevent riots there. Now, China has not done that yet. The unrest so far has been between demonstrators who want more democratic reforms in Hong Kong and the city's local government and police. And there have been some demonstrations in support of police in the local government. All the unrest is taking a toll on Hong Kong's economy, though, and after last weekend, China's government-controlled media indicated that the mainland is losing patience with the protesters. Many of them were peaceful, but a smaller group built barricades in the streets and threw bricks, metal poles, and other weapons at police. 21 officers were reportedly injured. Police used water cannons for the first time to push back protesters, and 86 people were arrested throughout the weekend, ranging in age from 12 to 51 years old. Police have called the protesters' actions outrageous. Protesters have called the police response excessive. Witnesses, like CNN's Andrew Stevens, show us how unstable things have become.
We've been witnessing very tense scenes here for the past 30 minutes or so. Protesters are slowly moving up on the police lines who've been responding with volley after volley of tear gas. And you can see now that petrol bombs are being thrown by protesters. At least half a dozen we have seen in the last 30 minutes or so. And we've also seen pockets of protesters who've been preparing those petrol bombs actually on the site. Police at this stage still using tear gas and other projectiles, so we can't confirm exactly what they are, but we've seen them flying through the air. We have perhaps several hundred protesters at the front line here, but behind them there are several thousand more. There's a rhythmic beating on whatever they can find to get the message across, to keep the spirits, if you like, of the people here on this front line up. But at the moment, the police are just using tear gas and some sort of projectile. Behind that first line of police, we have seen hundreds of others. They've moved out of sight at the moment, but they are, it looks at this stage at least, preparing to make a much bigger move. Andrew Stevens, CNN, Hong Kong.
About 2,000 miles southwest of Hong Kong, we come to Jakarta. It's currently the capital of Indonesia, but it's not going to stay that way. Jakarta is sinking. The main cause is that too much of the city's groundwater has been pumped out. It's used for everything from bathing to industry. And when groundwater's removed, the earth above it sinks. Another issue is that Jakarta sits on swampy ground to begin with, and it borders the Java Sea. That makes it vulnerable to flooding. Combine that with constant traffic congestion, air pollution, and rapid growth, an estimated 10 million people live in Jakarta, and you have a burden that Indonesia's president says is too big for a capital to bear. So what now? The country's going to build a new one. At a cost of $34 billion, Indonesia plans to transform a jungle-covered area on eastern Borneo Island into the nation's new capital. Borneo is the third largest island in the world. It's mostly owned by Indonesia, though some parts belong to Malaysia and Brunei. The new Indonesian capital would be several hundred miles away from Jakarta across the Java Sea. 10-second trivia. Actual air temperature is combined with relative humidity to measure what? Heat index, thermal energy, real feel, or radiation? Temperature plus humidity equals the heat index, how hot the weather actually feels to you. The U.S. Centers for Disease Control says more than 600 Americans are killed every year by extreme heat. And because they're in the midst of baseball season, football season, cross-country season, schools across the U.S. are trying to find new ways to protect students who are training outside. Some are turning to something called the wet bulb globe temperature. It goes beyond the heat index, taking into account sun angle, cloud cover, and wind speed.
Traditionally, people often use the heat index. This is fine for normal everyday activities such as gardening or taking kids to a park because most of those activities don't involve intense exercise.
One thing we try to do is be proactive, especially the best interests of the kids, and just making sure that we're putting their safety, first in everything that we do. So we always get with the trainers and we come up with a plan.
Some schools and organizations are switching to a method of measurement used by the military for decades to help prevent heat-related illnesses. It's called wet bulb globe temperature.
Using a wet bulb globe temperature device can help coaches and parents better determine things like when to have hydration breaks, length of practices or playtime, and rest ratios.
Once it gets to 92, that's when we say they can't practice outdoors. Before that, they can do things like modify what they're wearing. They can do shells, which would be without the pads, they would still wear the helmets. But once we get to a point where it's that high, we just call it.
All right, Allison, clearly this guy is hot, he's overheating, but it's not just the temperature making him sweat like this.
Right, so Coy, in normal environmental conditions, when you sweat, that sweat evaporates off your body like it's doing to this gentleman here. That effectively cools your skin off. But in a high humidity environment, that sweat cannot evaporate properly. Because of that, it means that that sweat stays on your skin, making it feel as though you're wearing an extra layer of clothes.
No one wants to wear a sweater playing sports in the summer, essentially is what you're saying. So humidity, very important. What other elements do we need to consider?
Right, so heat index is very important. It measures temperature as well as the humidity, but there's other things to factor. Coy, when was the last time you ever saw an entire practice done in the shade?
I don't think that happens.
Never. So that's just it. Wet bulb globe temperature also takes into account the sun angle, cloud cover, and wind speed, which is why this method is much better at monitoring student athletes.
Much more detail. So what can you do to help prevent heat stroke and other heat-related illnesses? The CDC says you can wear loose-fitting, lightweight clothing, stay hydrated, protect against sunburn with SPF, and take it easy during the hottest parts of the day.
It's also important to know the signs of heat stroke. They include high body temperature, a very fast, strong pulse. You will often get very intense headaches, dizziness, nausea, confusion, and you can even lose consciousness.
Absolute loneliness and self-sufficiency. That might not sound like the ideal description of a 2.5-month vacation in the Pacific. On the other hand, that's what it took for Antonio De La Rosa to set a new record paddleboarding alone from San Francisco, California to Honolulu, Hawaii. He covered 2,900 miles to raise awareness about ocean pollution.
Aloha! Welcome to Hawaii! How are you doing?
This was Antonio De La Rosa's first contact with another human being since he paddled away from San Francisco on June 9th. The 42-year-old ultra-endurance athlete from Spain is the first person to cross the Pacific Ocean as a stand-up paddleboarder.
It's a record for me and for everybody.
He covered about 2,500 miles of open ocean using wind, currents, and elbow grease.
No motor, no. Only the motor this is the motor.
His vessel, the Ocean Defender, is a combo paddleboard and small boat with a sleeping cabin, storage bins, and solar panels for power.
GPS, one inside and one outside. Computer.
GoPro cameras documented his days and nights at sea. There was no escort vessel, so he was all alone. He estimates he lost about 10 pounds, but never got sick, despite very little sleep.
Every hour I get up, checking the GPS, and checking the direction, moving the system.
Hurricane Flossie didn't hit him, but it did push him off course.
During 1 week, I was to the north, and I think, oof, what happened?
He once rowed across the Atlantic Ocean. Now he's conquered the Pacific.
Aloha! Os espero en Hawaii! Adios, amigos!
He surely wasn't up the creek, but without his paddle, the trip would have been horrible. We're not sure how he paddled boredom, but he seems like a stand-up guy. We're all a boat covering current events like that. There's just an ocean of possibilities, and we hope you'll stand another show tomorrow when CNN 10 sets sail. I'm Carl Azus.